Hello everyone, I'm Undercooked History, and you're not. In this modern day and age, we hear so much talk and babble on social media and on the news from politicians all across the aisle. Many of these incidents can range from innocent gaffes.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has,
You'd be surprised.
To downright worrisome at times.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
But I think it's important to understand, whether we believe it or not, politicians are still human, and they're bound to make mistakes. So this phenomenon of our elected officials sometimes saying the wrong thing, or something rather silly,
I did not call Senator Sanders an ignorant slut,
isn't anything new, and has in fact been around for decades upon decades.
If I should ever decide in the future to discuss my deep Christian beliefs and condemnation and sinfulness, I'll use another forum besides Playboy.
So for today's video, I wanted to explore a pool of several American politicians and take the time to highlight at least one major political gaffe and analyze their actual context to hopefully illustrate that these slip-ups don't always correlate to incompetency or foolishness, but more so humaneness, in a sense. For as many problems that truly plague our world, and the dozens of completely valid reasons anyone can have to criticize our elected officials and the legislation that they pass, I think that gaffes are usually the wrong and more inconsequential area to focus on. Instead, I feel it's important to acknowledge anything a politician says, but when really forming an opinion on anyone for that matter, I think the more important thing to hone in on is their actions. Before we start examining famous examples of gaffes in American politics, it's imperative that we first define what a political gaffe is. Well, according to Google, it can be defined as a mistake or blunder in speech or action made by a politician that then attracts media attention and public scrutiny. I think this is a perfectly good framework to keep in mind as I go over the 5 examples I've picked for today, each from a different decade, to truly capture just how long this has been an issue. An issue which I'm certain goes back farther than the 1970s.
We did get something, a gift. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog, and our little girl Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers.
But is one I feel has likely been exasperated with time and the growing influence of media on political perception. So without further ado, let's get things started with a trip back to October of 1976.
There's a change that's come over America, a change that's great to see.
There is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration.
Ah, yes. The first debate between President Gerald Ford and Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter. In this debate, Ford mistakenly claimed that the Soviets would not build a presence in Eastern Europe, when he clearly meant to say Western Europe. To add insult to injury, the moderator even gave Ford a chance to correct himself.
I'm sorry, could I just follow? Did I understand you to say, sir, that the Russians are not using Eastern Europe as their own sphere of influence and occupying most of the countries there?
And he just didn't catch the hint.
I believe, Mr. Frankel, that the Yugoslavians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union.
This answer hurt President Ford's already damaged reputation even farther, and added to the image he'd already garnered up to that point from incidents like falling on Air Force One and Chevy Chase's infamous portrayal of the Commander-in-Chief on Saturday Night Live as being clumsy and unfit to be president.
Hello.
Ultimately, Ford would go on to lose the 1976 election to Carter. While it's impossible to certifiably cite this incident as the chief contributor of his loss, that likely goes to the Nixon pardon, this certainly did not help his image in the mindset of the average voter.
It's perfectly obvious that my voice isn't.
The time is soon. The place is America.
Michael Dukakis has opposed virtually every defense system we developed. He opposed new aircraft carriers, He opposed anti-satellite weapons. He opposed 4 missile systems, including the Pershing II missile deployment.
In the heat of the 1988 election, George H.W. Bush was considerably ahead of his opponent, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis, as he essentially campaigned on another 4 years of Reagan. And one of Dukakis's weakest areas on the campaign trail was in his perceived softness on defense and military spending. In order to try and repair his image on the issue, Dukakis approached General Dynamics for a photo op in a tank, a trick that had reportedly helped British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher get re-elected the year prior. Unfortunately for Dukakis, this backfired horrendously, as it made him look silly and extremely out of touch to most viewers, something the Bush campaign quickly capitalized on by producing an ad attacking Dukakis that aired during the World Series that year.
He even criticized our rescue mission to Grenada and our strike on Libya. And now he wants to be our commander-in-chief. America can't afford that risk.
Hoping to save his even more embarrassed image, the Dukakis campaign produced a rivaling ad attacking Bush for his negative ads.
Haven't seen anything like it in 25 years of public life, George Bush's negative TV ads, distorting my record, full of lies, and he knows it. I'm on the record for the very weapons systems his ads say I'm against. I want to build a strong defense. I'm sure he wants to build a strong defense. So this isn't about defense issues. It's about dragging the truth into the gutter.
But this only drew further attention to the much more successful tank attack ad. Ultimately, Dukakis would handily lose the election to Bush.
Politics is higher taxes. Politics is fewer jobs, federal regulations, surely Congress doing drugs. I'll tell you.
For this video section on the 1990s, I immediately knew I just had to do something on former Vice President Dan Quayle. He simply had so many memorable moments during his political limelight to pass up on being the subject of farther examination.
We all lived in this century. I didn't live in this century, but in this century's history.
Of these many incidents, what is likely the most famous example occurred in 1992 when Quayle visited a New Jersey elementary school to moderate a school spelling bee.
Spell that again. Add one little bit on the end. Just think of potato. How's it? So, you write phonetically. What else? There you go.
Well, this was probably one of the more inconsequential and harmless examples of gaffes. This did not deter the media from having a field day with the VP's mistake. And a couple months later, Quayle and his boss, President H.W. Bush, lost their re-election bid to Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. Quayle would later defend himself on the situation in a 1994 book titled Standing Firm. In it, he would say, "No one actually ever asked me to spell potato that afternoon. If they had, I imagine I'd have gotten it right, though I wouldn't swear to it. I'm not the world's greatest speller, and while I could bore you with a lot of stories about other politicians' deficiencies in this area, I'm going to try to concentrate on the ridiculous facts." We got to the point where it was 12-year-old William Figueroa's turn to go to the board and spell whatever was on the next card, which was the word potato, except that the card prepared by the school read potato with an E. I can't remember if the spelling struck me as odd or not, but William spelled it correctly on the blackboard, no E. I noticed the discrepancy, showed the card to the other adults with me, and as they nodded in agreement, I gently said something about how he was close, but had left a little something off. So William, against his better judgment, and trying to be polite, added an E. The little audience down in front applauded him, and that was it.
This land is your land, this land is my land. I'm a Texas tiger, you're a liberal wiener.
The Dean scream. The gaffe to end all gaffes, and the biggest reason why I wanted to make this video. Early on in the 2004 Democratic primaries, there were 3 major candidates: Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts, Senator John Edwards of North Carolina, and of course, Vermont Governor Howard Dean. The Dean campaign was that of an underdog grassroots campaign, so upon finishing 3rd at the Iowa caucus on January 19th, 2004, he spoke to supporters very enthusiastically.
Third in Iowa, we would have given anything for that. And you know something? You know something? Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. And we're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
Following this incident, the general public found the speech to be loud, peculiar, and unpresidential, despite it certainly seeming mild by today's standards. What immediately followed the incident was an onslaught of media attention, where in just the next 4 days, the soundbite of Dean's scream was played an estimated 633 times by cable and broadcast news networks. Several comedians made fun of Dean over the next week as well, such as Dave Chappelle.
We're not just going to go to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin.
And Conan O'Brien.
Now, please welcome Governor Howard Dean. Let's get him in here. See what's happening. All right. Welcome. Welcome.
And ultimately, former frontrunner Howard Dean lost a previous 30-point lead at the New Hampshire primary and came in second to John Kerry. The only primary he won was in his home state of Vermont, and so he ultimately dropped out of the race. More recently, though, he doesn't seem to be too bitter about the whole thing, seeing as he kinda reenacted the moment at the 2016 DNC, where Hillary Clinton was nominated.
Because this race is going to be won on the ground. And it's going to be won in Colorado and in Iowa and North Carolina and Michigan and Florida and Pennsylvania, and then we're going to the White House.
On October 7th, 2016, a month before the presidential election, and what was one of many October surprises in that election cycle,
I made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
And if I had to do it over again, I would obviously do it differently.
The Washington Post published both an article and a video of Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump speaking with television host Billy Bush on a bus traveling to film an episode of Access Hollywood in September of 2005, where the future president was recorded saying rather grotesque things about women.
I gotta use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just, I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the you can do anything.
As a result, Bush was fired from his position on the Today Show, and public support and polling dropped substantially for Trump, resulting in a rare instance where the presidential nominee issued an apology of sorts.
I've said and done things I regret, and the words released today on this more than a decade-old video are one of them. Anyone who knows me knows these words don't reflect who I am. I said it, I was wrong, and I apologize.
Ultimately, Trump would win the 2016 presidential election, and as of this video, he is the current president of the United States, having won a non-consecutive term back in November 2024.
Whoop-de-doo! What does it all mean, Basil?
As you can see, gaffes have been present in American politics for decades. Heck, there's a whole subset of gaffes just dedicated to 43rd President George W. Bush called Bushisms that I didn't even cover in today's video.
Misunderestimate.
I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully.
Thank you, Rolling. That's awesome speech.
So while gaffes in and of themselves should not be any inherent cause for worry or contributing factor towards potential political decline that I know a number of people have observed in recent years, we should nonetheless remain cautious and vigilant. For better or for worse, it seems to me at the very least, that likely in part to the increased usage of social media and culture over the last few election cycles, that while the number of gaffes has increased exponentially, or at the very least their exposure, their actual impact has undoubtedly dropped substantially to have next to no impact at all, seemingly. For so many politicians have increasingly used polarizing and buzz-fueled rhetoric, which I believe has led to a sort of desensitization of the American populace to behavior that would have just 10 years ago ended entire careers in politics, as a lot of people feel stuck and having to support whichever candidate is to their ideology the lesser of two evils. Now, whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing that we place less of an emphasis on what our elected officials say or the mistakes that they make when they talk is up to you to determine individually. But in my own humble opinion, I think it's complicated at best and dangerous at worst. Well, that's all I have for today's video. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. And as always, have a wonderful day.